Did you know that only 60% of eligible voters actually cast a ballot in 2016? According to the NPR article titled On the Sidelines of Democracy, Exploring Why So Many Americans Don't Vote, which was published in 2018, only 6 in 10 people actually cast a ballot. That means if you were in a room with 10 people, 6 of those people will be deciding the fate of the entire country. That's a really big deal. Now you may be asking yourself, well, why doesn't everyone just vote? Why is it that big of a deal to vote? Well, most of us are old enough to vote, and we realize that at this point in our lives, there's different opportunities for different people involved in a lot of things. The same refers to voting. Strict ID laws, inaccessibility of polling places, and the wait time involved with voting can all affect the discrimination of minorities when voting. In this presentation, I will use Black and African American interchangeably just for everyone's information. Now this picture is just showing voting at the polls in New York, and it's very recent, it's from this year. This picture, map of the United States, is showing the strict ID laws in different states. So as you can tell, in Texas, there are very strict photo ID laws. This might mean you need your driver's license as well as proof of residency or your birth certificate, something along those lines. Whereas in California, you might really only need your driver's license or maybe not that at all. Just show that you're registered to vote. This can be a very large problem when actually voting for minorities. The Atlantic reports in an article titled Voter Suppression is Warping Democracy in 2018 that 9% of Blacks and 9% of Hispanics face trouble with ID laws, compared to only 3% of whites that face troubles. That is a 6% difference between whites and minorities, which can have a huge effect on the outcome of the election. In the journal Mother Jones, there's an article titled Block the Vote by Rios. Rios says the voter ID laws are purposefully attacking minorities. What he means by that is that when it becomes so challenging for minorities to vote that they end up not being able to vote, that is a racial discrimination problem. For example, in Texas, North Carolina, and Wisconsin, strict voter ID laws could prevent 1.2 million people from voting. That's a huge amount. Now, strict ID laws are a huge problem when it comes to voting. However, there are also other problems like the accessibility of polling places. In the Supreme Court case Shelby County versus Holder in Shelby County, Alabama, according to the website Oyez, which focuses on Supreme Court cases, the Supreme Court ruled that Section 5 and 4B of the Constitution are unconstitutional in a 5-4 vote. Section 5 and 4B focused on the fact that districts could not make their own rules without discussing it, getting approval from a large governing body, i.e. the federal government. Now that this is not a law, districts can make their own decisions for elections, which means they can close polling places and not make them as accessible for minorities. The judges who voted no on the issue, the 4 of them that were the minority, said that this is a civil rights issue and districts making their own decisions can definitely have effects on the election. For example, closing polls. This picture is just showing the voter suppression by whites and how minorities don't always get that same opportunity. Now this picture is showing the number of polling place closures since Shelby. So these states, all after the Supreme Court decision, made this decision to close polling places, which can be a huge problem. According to the governing magazine, an article titled Polling Places in Black Communities Continue to Close Ahead of November Elections, published in 2018, 10 communities in Georgia closed their polling places in Black communities. Rhett Chick, a psychology professor at Cal State, says that this will lessen the turnout of people who disagree with your position, which obviously may keep you in power and keep your position holding strong, even though the majority of people don't necessarily agree with this. Now, Accessibility to polling places can be a huge issue, but what if you are able to vote, you have the right identification? What now? What's a burden? Well, wait time. The wait time involved with minorities compared to whites is a very large problem. There's an article titled "Smartphone Data Shows Voters in Black Neighborhoods Wait Longer" in the Scientific American magazine in 2019. Data from 10 million smartphones was collected from 93,658 polling places. The study, led by Keith Chen of UCLA, said that Blacks wait 29% on average longer than whites to vote. That's a huge difference that can definitely make a difference if you're willing to go out, spend your time, and wait to vote. As you can see in the chart, this shows that Blacks on average wait 23.3 minutes, while whites only wait 11.6 minutes, and Hispanics and Asians are also much higher than whites. Now, a problem that we have lately is everything dealing with COVID-19. So how will that affect the election? Well, there is an article titled "Going Postal" in the Mother Jones article, published in 2020. States like Texas, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and a few others, you cannot vote by mail unless you don't live there at the current time of the election. For example, if you grew up in Texas, you live in Texas, resident of Texas, but you came to school in Arkansas, you can vote by mail. However, if you're there and you just don't want to go to the polling places because you're more susceptible of COVID, then you're really out of luck. Well, this picture shows that the ratio between Blacks and whites dying from COVID is 98 to 47. If you were that susceptible of COVID, would you really want to go wait in line for a long period of time just to cast a ballot when you could end up getting sick and dying? It's a very big price to pay, and it's a large thing to consider. In conclusion, discrimination in voting is a very large issue due to strict ID laws, the inaccessibility of polling places in minority areas, and the wait time involved in polling places for minorities. I hope that this will leave you with the impression to go out and understand that voting is not something that we can take for granted, and it's actually very challenging for a lot of people. And we need to understand that going forward. Thank you.